Ukrainian media outlet Tribuna was reporting overnight that Chelsea's Mykhailo Mudryk has tested positive for a banned substance in a recent doping test. The testing process for the B sample has now been initiated. The A sample was initially tested. Now the B sample has been initiated with results expected in the coming days. And here's the thing, if the B sample also tests positive, Mudryk of Chelsea could face a suspension of up to 4 years. So what is going on with this? No comment at the moment thus far from either the FA or Chelsea, but we're going to hear the very latest now from my colleague here at talkSPORT, Ben Jacobs. Ben, good morning. You join us live. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, good morning. My understanding is that the Chelsea winger Mykhailo Mudryk has been provisionally suspended from football after being notified of a positive drugs test by the Football Association. Now, this is an A test that Chelsea are also investigating, and there's the possibility that the actual sample itself might have even been contaminated. Mudryk has a specialist law firm representing him, and the reason why at the moment we should say Chelsea are not commenting and nor formally are the FA is because this is an A sample and there is still a B sample test that needs to come back to provide the full picture. But in these kind of instances, when an A sample is positive, it is at the discretion of the authorities, the FA in this case, to provisionally suspend the player. And my understanding is that has happened. Now, those close to Mudryk are adamant that he has not been formally charged with anything. Again, the B test is very important to all of this, but at the moment he cannot play competitive football because my understanding is that he is provisionally suspended pending further outcomes and of course testing, and Chelsea are supporting him in every way they can.
Ben, at this stage, is there any more information regarding the substance that he is alleged to have taken?
No, and I think that's the key point in all of this. And I mentioned before that some people close to Mudryk point out that he's undergone drugs tests before, including in August, and therefore contamination is always a possibility, which is why you do the B test as well. So we're not at a point to say how this has come about or whether the substance, for example, is deemed to be widely illegal or performance enhancing. We simply know that when the A test is positive, regardless of whether that's due to contamination or something more intentional, the FA have the discretion to provisionally suspend the player, and the gap between A and B, depending on circumstance, depending on federation, and obviously in this case with Mudryk, depending on needing the correct period of time between A and B after the first positive test, can take anything up to 3 weeks. So the original test is understood to be late October, that has come back with this positive result. And then if you add 3 weeks, do the B test and add roughly another 3 weeks, we should get a clearer picture in the coming days because the A and B test should be back by this mid-December period.
Of course, since he joined, Ben, he's been in and out the team. He's really a starter. His last appearance was on November the 28th in a UEFA Conference League match against Heidenheim, and he actually scored a goal in that one. Ben Simon is alongside me, as he is every morning. Simon, you and I speak about this. We speak about this because it rears its head in the world of boxing. Of course it does, but it's unusual when football gets involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is statistically the case that I think it's about 99% of the time the B samples are exactly the same as the A sample because they're taken from the same scenario. So I think it's unlikely that there'll be anything different in the B test than there is in the A. The big component part now is, I mean, I don't know who the testing agency is. Is it UKED? I assume it must be. And we've seen how they operate recently.
It appears that he's citing Mudryk allegedly citing contamination, which again is something we hear in the boxing world too.
Yeah, well, that's often the answer, isn't it? It doesn't mean that's the reality. I mean, the bottom line is the substance has to be identified, and the component parts of it have to be addressed. But the bottom line is it's appropriate for the player to be suspended if he's failed a test. Irrespective of what he thinks about it and how the process has to follow, I do think it's appropriate. You either want to remove the drug taking in whichever sport it is. It's very unique for football. We're seeing it more in other sports than we have in football. But notwithstanding it, there is a process to be followed. I do think that I would be gobsmacked and I hope to be, because nobody wants to see anybody banned for anything other than the things they're guilty of.
Yeah.
I'd be gobsmacked if his B sample comes back anything different than the A.
Yeah. Of late, we know, Simon, that Enzo Maresca has cited Mudryk's recent absence due to illness. What do you make to their no comment so far? Nothing coming out of the football club at this stage?
Listen, the football club are operating at a very high level on the field right now. I don't think him not being available to them is particularly affecting the side. I mean, the ownership model might be frustrated with the fact they spent £90 million on a player, which is now on their balance sheet at about 70 million quid and may well now be a problem for them going forward. But I think it's an incidental for them. It's not ideal. Who wants to see players in this situation? Nobody wants to see it, but it's not affecting Chelsea on the field, is it?
It's an 8.5-year contract that he signed, and as you rightly say, it was a deal worth up to £89 million. If in the longer term he's found guilty, would you expect Chelsea to rip up the contract?
No. Depends what he's guilty of. It's no point speculating. Depends what the substance is. Depends what the reasons behind it. I don't know whether they're operating on a strict liability policy. I don't know what the parameters around football governance is. In boxing and under the British Boxing Board of Control, we've seen that strict liability is something that's supposed to be enforced. It hasn't been, and seemingly. And so in this instance, I don't know what football's governance policy is. We've seen Yannick Sinner in sport, in tennis, be able to account for a substance that came into his system. Before we get into the territory of what should happen to this player, we should understand what the substance is and then what the explanation is, and then you start taking your views.
Yes. So at the moment, Simon, if you're in a position, and you have been in a position, you've owned a football club, if you're in a position of Todd Bowley or Igbali at Chelsea, it's an information gathering process just now.
I mean, with the greatest respect to the circumstance, the person that's got the most jeopardy attached to this is the player. Chelsea Football Club can well afford to write off money if they have to. They'll take a view. They've got incredibly wealthy owners. Nobody wants to write off tens of millions of pounds, but this is not going to determine Chelsea's future. All the furore about how much they've spent, all the offence about how much money they've wasted on players, they didn't seem to be concerned by it. This is a challenge for them. They've been here before in different guises for different reasons. They were here with Mark Bosnich. They were here with Adrian Mutu for different reasons, and they've taken views at that particular time, and those views have had challenges, with Mutu having to have all kinds of consequences visited upon him.
Yeah. Simon, at this stage we can go back to Ben Jacobs, because we're hearing that Chelsea have just made a statement on this. Ben, what have you got?
Yeah, they have. Chelsea Football Club have confirmed that the Football Association, quote, recently contacted Mykhailo Mudryk concerning an adverse finding in what they call a, quote, routine urine test. The statement goes on to say both the club and Mykhailo fully support the FA's testing programme, and all our players, including Mykhailo, are regularly tested. Mykhailo has confirmed, quote, categorically that he has never knowingly used any banned substances, and the statement finishes, both Mykhailo and the club will now work with the relevant authorities to establish what has caused this adverse finding. And Chelsea point out they will not be commenting any further. So they don't quite go so far as to confirm a provisional suspension, but obviously he is not playing, and those close to the player do stand up that belief that during this investigation for this adverse test on urine, he will not be able to play for Chelsea Football Club. And of course, that B sample is expected back in this mid-December period, so in the next couple of days.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.